And now the final way, the aging accounts. And if you have a really large accounts receivable, this is how I think I would do it. The others are maybe quicker, but I think this is much more precise, really, if you have a large accounts receivable. And what you do with this one is you're basically looking at the entire accounts receivable again. So that means, depending on what your balances are, that will tell you what your bad debts expense is, okay? So let's go back and let's look at this. When you have accounts receivable, anything over 90 days, when you look at it, if they haven't paid it, you're probably going to have a lot more default at that point than you do when they're not due yet, correct? In the 30 days. So that's how they break this down. They break it down per period of amount of time that it's overdue. The first one, you're only looking at maybe 2% because it's not due yet. So we're saying, oh, the likelihood of that is 2% of those will be bad. But as you go up 1 to 30, the amount that is that may default is going to go up. So you'll establish your percentages, and then you'll create a table. And you will put each amount in and then find out how much you think will be uncollectible for the period. And you'll just multiply them by these percents. And, gosh, that was cute. Let's go up here. So I've got 415, 109, 55. This one should be 37. And this one should be 49. So let's double check. 415, 109, 55, 37, and 49. Then you'll multiply those by the percent. And I'm going to do the quick and dirty, obviously. So these become your amounts. And this is your total. And now you're ready. But this is going to be the amount of the entire accounts receivable that will be uncollectible. You have to remember that previous to this, in the previous period, part of this was also included in the previous. So the question asks, okay, here's your amount, you've got that, and then you want to prepare the bad debts expense using the estimate from Part A, right here, this one. And you're going to look at it as if the first one, it has a 55,000 or 5,500 credit. So what is the amount we want to have in there? And that's where you have to look at this and say, well, I need to have, my estimated balance needs to be 23,220. Then that's my balance. That's what I'm shooting for. So what you figured here is the balance. What you're going to calculate here is the bad debts. We have 55, we need 23. So what's my adjusting entry going to be? Well, it's going to be the 23 minus the 55. So this becomes my bad debt expense. And that would be my entry, bad debts expense, and then the allowance. So this would be 17,720. Now, but this, then they ask us to flip that. Okay, so now they say, well, what happens if we don't have a balance of 55, but we have a debit balance of 2,000? And I still need this. So what would be my bad debts entry then? What would be the balance? So if I need this and I'm in the hole 2,000, I'm going to have to add that 2,000 to that balance to bring it up to what I need. So now my bad debts expense is 25,220, and my allowance gets credited for 25,220. So you can see the difference. A direct write-off is just simply that. You directly write it off. The percent of sales, again, is whatever my percent is what my bad debts is. When I look at the percent of accounts receivable in its entirety, then I've got to adjust that bad debts to match whatever I have in the allowance to begin with. The calculation for the bad debts becomes the balance for the allowance. The same thing with the aging. The aging is just identical to the percent of accounts receivable, except you're breaking it down per past due, days past due, to get a better reflection. Now, after you've done that, the recordings here to write off and reestablish. Okay, if you write it off here because you know it's definitely wrong, those entries are not going to change. It's just how you figure it and what your bad debts expense becomes. So, percent of sales, what you calculate is what the bad debts is. On the percent of accounts receivable and aging, what you calculate is actually the balance of the allowance that you need, and then you make the adjustment up according to whether a debit or credit balance. I hope that helps. Next, we're going to look at the homework.